Okay, good evening. We're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. My name is Ruth Giles, and I am the Education and Research Coordinator for Texas Health Environment Alliance for THEA. First, I'd like to ask if there are any lawyers or any press here with us today to go ahead and announce yourself. We're going on volume? Okay. If we have any elected officials here, I'd like for them also to introduce themselves. Do we have anyone here as an elected official?
Well, I'm Lawrence Bell. I'm with.
I would give you the microphone.
Lawrence Bell, Harris County Precinct 3, Commissioner Tom Ranson's office.
Awesome, thank you so much. So I see a lot of familiar faces here tonight. If there's anybody new, I'd like for you to go ahead and raise your hand just so we can see if there's anyone who's joining us for the first time today. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so for THEA, we work on educating and engaging communities to advocate for the cleanup for contamination to protect public health and the environment. We have a couple of housekeeping rules for tonight. We're going to hold all questions to the end. We do have a variety of things we're going to be covering tonight, so we want to respect your time. And also, you should have received the agenda in addition to a survey, which we'd like for you all to fill out and then return to the sign-in sheet table. If you did not receive the agenda or the survey, if you could raise your hand, and one of our team members will bring it to you. Okay, thank you. Okay, so a little bit about THEA. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and on the top left over here, your guys' right, there is an image. I know a lot of you guys have seen it before, but also what I would like for you to do is just kind of, look at it and think, what does it represent to you? So I would just like for you guys to take a moment to just go ahead and do that. Okay, so this was actually part of the Houston Press, which was a cover story, and it recognized our CEO and founder, Jackie Metcalf, and actually her family home, which is depicting the snake, which is actually the Sanchester River. They had a groundwater well, and they thought they had a pristine well, they had clean water, and they just thought they would have a great time recreating on the river, which actually is deemed the American nightmare. Knowing they were living next to 4 Superfund sites, and actually being, their water was contaminated. So we have an approach. We emphasize on environmental health literacy, strategic science, and also grassroots organizing. We are not a law firm, and we are not a water filtration company. So a little bit why we're here tonight. As you know, we're here to focus on the Jones Road Groundwater Plume Superfund site. Here, sorry, I didn't get my little pointer. You can see we have where ground zero is. So back in 1988, Bell Dry Cleaner was actually dumping improperly their dry clean solvents out back. And due to this, from 1988 to 2002, it created groundwater plume, which caused the pollution, which is actually moving westward at this time. You can be exposed due by groundwater and also through vapor intrusion. So we're actually going to pass this off to Rachel, who's our assistant director, who's going to be talking about what we're doing to remedy this site.
Thank you, Ruth. So what's being done to remedy this site? We have in place the soil vapor extraction system, which began operating in 2019. This addresses the shallow vapors at the source area, and it's expected to run for about another year until about September of 2025. Additionally, the EPA is still connecting people from their groundwater wells to the White Oak Bend Municipal Utility District's water line. If you live within the red area on this map up here, it's a little difficult to see with the lighting, but this red outline up here is going to be that water line area where residents who are still on groundwater wells can connect to the White Oak Bend Municipal Utility District's water line for free, and then you will just pay your water bill after that time. I believe the EPA had 4 residents in this area interested in switching over to the water line last year, and they connected at least 2 to the water line recently, but we're still waiting on confirmation to see how many exactly they got switched over from that. Unfortunately, with these things that are in place being done to remedy this, protecting public health and water resources is still moving at a snail's pace at Jones Road, but it doesn't have to be. Over the past 10 years or so, we've noticed a pattern of somewhat inactivity at this site. In 2013, the EPA produced a report with recommendations for the site, and less than half of those recommendations were implemented. During the first 5-year review in 2017, they concluded that it was inconclusive whether or not the remedies at this site were being protective of human health and the environment. And then by 2022, the 5-year review determined that the current remedies at this site are not protective of human health and the environment. That determination is a really big deal because the EPA only said that 5 sites in the nation received this designation in 2022. So it's something that we really want to keep pressing the EPA to get this site cleaned up, because there are still open exposure pathways, potentially exposing people to these contaminants of concern in this area. Some of the things that the EPA can do to help protect people is implement institutional controls. Institutional controls are essential to site remedies because they help reduce exposure to contamination by limiting land and resource use and promoting health protective decisions. As you can see from this slide here, one of those institutional controls that the EPA had recommended being implemented was notifying area residents of the presence of these contaminants of concern above remedial goals in groundwater beneath their properties. In 2017, when this recommendation was made, the original milestone date was 2020. Fast forward to the second 5-year review that happened in 2022, that recommendation is still being made, but the new milestone date for that is 2026. We find that this timeline is unacceptable because people need to be protected now from the potential contaminants from this site. So we are pushing the EPA to make sure that these milestone dates are not only met, but they are exceeded, so that this stuff can get done much more quickly. So where exactly are we seeing this contamination? This right here is the EPA's plume map. As you can see from the map, it looks like there are 2 different source areas because there are 2 different plumes on this map, when in fact we know that that is not the case. There's only one source of contamination in this area. When we asked the EPA about this, they said that they are missing and don't have data for this middle section right here, and so that's why their plume map looks like this. So we took data from the EPA over time and we mapped it on this map using the purple triangles. That's going to be your EPA's findings of contaminants of concern over time. And then we also mapped where we have found the contaminants of concern using those red stars on the map. And you should have picked up one of these maps as you walked in as well. So you can get a little bit of a better look at it close up. So these are the areas that we're finding contamination and where contamination has been found over time. So we depicted the plume to it looks a little bit bigger and it's more connected, showing that there is one source of this contamination. During our quarterly water testing that we started doing, not only have we found those red stars of contamination within the original plume area, but we have also found contamination to the northwest of the site as well. We don't believe that the contaminant, which is carbon tetrachloride that we found, is related to the site at all. We have tested other properties around this red star up here, and we have not found this contamination, so we believe that this contamination that we did find is a hyper-localized issue, and we are working with the homeowners to decide next steps and to address that. Us doing quarterly water testing is important because there are fluctuating levels of these contaminants coming in and out of people's wells. As you can see from this table here, back in December of 2015, the contaminant of concern was at its highest that we've seen, and then over the years it has fluctuated up and down since then. And that being said, it is important for us to monitor these wells to make sure that even if there's a hit of one of these contaminants that is below the maximum contaminant level that the EPA has set, we want to still track this because that MCL, or maximum contaminant level, is a feasibility standard and it's not a health-based standard. So we want to make sure that people know and are informed and able to make protective decisions about their health based on the amount of contaminants that we are or are not finding in their wells. Another issue that we noticed while doing this testing is that the levels of contamination that we're finding in people's tap water versus their well water is slightly different. If you look at this table here, you can see that the instances where we have gathered information from the tap water, which would be like this 1.8 and this 3 right here, those levels are slightly lower than the same testing that we did at the source of the well. So this is indicative of the fact that these contaminants are off-gassing somewhere in between the well and the tap. And that means that these are harmful contaminants that could be being released into the air and potentially affecting the health of residents as well. And now I'm going to pass it off to Jackie to let you guys know some ways that you can stay involved with this site.
All right, thank you all for being here tonight. I know we had some tough competition, unexpected. We definitely had this on the calendar before we learned about the debate tonight. But with the EPA coming to town next week, there was no way that we were going to cancel or postpone this meeting. We said, whatever community members want to be here tonight, we're going to be here and we're going to talk about important things ahead of the EPA's meeting next week. So on your agenda, you have the information for their meeting, and you also have a copy of their flyer. Their meeting is 1 week from today. It's at Belial at 6:30. Their handout's a little confusing in how they describe their meeting format in 2 different ways. It's an hour-and-a-half long meeting that appears to have a bit of a walk around in the beginning, and then they will have an actual sit-down presentation like they usually do. So why I'm talking about this topic and engagement moving forward really is because of the experience that I have with community engagement and the EPA over the last 13 years. So I want to talk about 2 different ways that the community could work with the EPA in more of a formal way. My understanding is most of you who are here tonight have been engaged in the Superfund process with the EPA for quite some time, right? Getting some nods, yeah? Okay, great. So, defining community involvement. This is directly from the EPA. And they define community involvement, it's the term they use for the process of engaging the community that have been affected by Superfund sites. So according to the agency, and we agree with this and then some, successful community involvement is when you increase the community's understanding and knowledge of a Superfund site. Effective community involvement helps supplement the EPA's understanding because nothing is more important in this process than the local knowledge, and that's historical and current. The EPA and those who make the decision over this site, they don't live around here. They don't see what goes on around here right now, nor did they historically. And effective community involvement and engagement can enhance the trust and the communication between the EPA and the communities. And oftentimes it can develop dialogues that get to the best possible solution. Because at the end of the day, I think that everyone wants the site cleaned up. How you get there and what you do in the interim is really what's on the table. So there's two avenues in which the EPA can engage with the community in more of a formal sense. So first is a community advisory group, or a CAG, and I'll probably refer to it from here on out as a CAG. So CAGs are funded from EPA headquarters. There is funding for the EPA to set up this CAG that can look like a committee or a board, and there are people from the community and additional impacted stakeholders who can be a part of this CAG. Now, I mentioned on the previous slide enhancing trust and the communication between the EPA and the communities. If the community is only hearing from the EPA or only seeing the EPA maybe once every 2 years, once every 5 years, the distrust builds, the doubt builds within the community. Is anything being done? I'm not seeing anyone test that monitoring well down the street from my home. What's happening with this site? So when you have a body that the EPA supports and facilitates, like a CAG, they can meet with the community, a small group of the community who is interested in this site and wants to have their opinion heard about this site more regularly. I'm on a community advisory or awareness committee for the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site, which is the site I lived by previously. And we meet with the CAC every quarter. And it's a really valuable setting for us to engage with the EPA, with the various stakeholders such as TCEQ, Harris County, the different agencies are also a part of it. And so talking now about, the CAG, it's an opportunity for you all to have that at this specific time in the process where the EPA is preparing to launch a new remedial investigation. So typically these sorts of bodies are set up early in the Superfund process. But because this site is going back to the drawing board and trying to figure out how do we address this deeper groundwater contamination, there's a whole new set of studies and processes are about to take place. And so it is yet again a critical time for the EPA to have a dialogue with the community. So that's why we're wanting tonight to talk with you more about the differences of what the agency can do. The CAG is not a decision-making entity, though you have that dialogue and interactions and exchange with the agency, and you have a more formal setting to sit down with them on a regular basis and hear the updates and have the space to ask your questions. It's not that the CAG makes decisions about what will be done, but from my experience, I'll tell you there's certainly an influence on the EPA when they come together with these groups.
Jackie, has this site ever had a CAG?
So not to my knowledge, not a formal CAG, but some of the folks.
That's not true.
Okay, well I was going to say, some of the folks said that they used to have something like this with the EPA.
We had a CAG.
You had a CAG. Were you on the CAG? What happened to it?
Nobody showed up.
Nobody showed up.
I mean, we were active for the first couple of years.
Yeah,
Everybody just wore down.
yeah.
All we hear is pop, 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 pop. Nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
Just like today. How many people live in the Superfund site?
Mhm.
How many people here? 2 of us that I know of.
Yeah.
2. This has been going on since 2002.
Yeah, I understand. I know it's really difficult in the long process to keep the folks around engaged and believing that something's actually going to happen.
Gave up on that a long time ago.
No, I know. I know there was a group of folks who were very involved in the early years at the Superfund site, and I've heard a couple of reasons why people stopped engaging. I wasn't aware that it was actually a formal CAG. Did y'all have like elections and set up a board, or, yeah? Okay. So I heard from some folks that once TCEQ had come back and taken filters off of homes in the neighborhood above the plume, that people thought everything was taken care of. And so that people really started dropping off after that took place, even though that wasn't really the situation. What we have at the Superfund site that I referenced earlier is a Community Awareness Committee, or a CAC. This is not something typical under CERCLA, whereas a CAG is. A CAC is much more of a round table setting. With a CAG, you actually set up, a board or a committee and have more of a formal structure, whereas a CAC is interested local stakeholders or impacted community members, and it's just much more informal. The CAC that we have at San Jacinto, I'm told by the EPA, is actually the only CAC that the EPA has. So so they said that it was started with the community, which is not true. It started with the polluter. So I was actually removed by police trying to go and be a part of the CAC, and then was invited to formally be a part of it. So the community didn't start it, but it is the only one. And not really sure why exactly it was set up that way. But it's a bit of a different beast with two large companies responsible for that site.
Who was in that CAC?
Prior to me?
Yeah, I don't mean their names. I mean, like, what kind of people were, the meeting you were attempting to get into that apparently they decided wasn't public? Who was in that meeting?
Yeah, so I still lived in the community at this time and found out, had been, doing this work for many years, and found out that there was this community advisory committee meeting the next day. And so it's like, well, we better go down there. Who of the community is there? And it was the county attorney. At the time was Vince Ryan. It was EPA, TCEQ, State Health Department. At the time, our commissioner was Jack Mormon. And then the polluters, their attorneys, and their consultants. And a nonprofit called Galveston Bay Foundation. Also, they had a representative there. So myself, my mother, and 3 community members went and asked to be a part of the community advisory committee meeting that had no community in it. And we were removed by police. It was at Harris County Pollution Control, actually, at your office. So pollution control was present, Bob Allen back then.
I'm with the state, not the county.
I'm sorry, that's Alita.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. All right, in front of you. Got it. Okay.
Sorry. That's Christina with Shaw's office. Yep. Yeah. But it has been very valuable for our community to be able to meet with the EPA through the process every quarter, and every time there's a new large body of work that's completed for the site. And now that this site is about to go through a highly technical process in determining what happens next, if folks care, I think it would be a good idea for you to ask the EPA to do that if folks want that type of communication from the EPA. So speaking of communication from the EPA, the survey we've mentioned and handed out tonight is going to help us understand what you want to hear about from the EPA next week, how you want to hear from the EPA moving forward. Too many times we hear from locals that they don't hear from the agency at all. So we will take the information that you put on this sheet and we will bring it to the EPA, or we will email it tomorrow to the EPA and let them know. Here's the questions, here's the concerns. This is what the community wants to hear from you when you come here next week. I believe the EPA has to have their PowerPoint approved on Friday. So we have from tonight until Friday to let them know what you all want to hear. So that's one of the reasons why we went ahead and had this meeting tonight, so we could hear from you and try to make their meeting next week as effective as possible and as meaningful for you all as possible. Okay, now I would like to invite Pamela Bonta to make a few remarks before,
Can I ask a question?
yes.
Have they updated their report from May that was full of errors?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
And great letter for calling them out on those errors. That was fantastic. Okay, my name is Pamela Bonta. I am the boots on the ground. I've been doing this for over a decade. So I just want to touch on the EPA really quickly. In my experience over the years with the EPA, so now we're giving them the questions a week ahead of time. Therefore, I don't believe that they should tell us, we don't know what to tell you. We'll get back to you on that. They are famous for putting people off. Don't be intimidated by them. Demand an answer. Whether they have to call you the next day or you call them, demand the answer. And if you think that maybe they're skirting around it, just be very forceful about it. If you don't want to be, let me know what questions you have and I will ask them. I'm very persistent with them and they know that. So do not let them intimidate you. Don't think any question you have is not good enough. Every question is good enough. So I'm excited for them to come. I hope you guys will be ready for them. But like I said, they are famous for saying, we don't know, we'll have to get back to you, and then they never get back to you. So that's their way of putting you off. Don't let them. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about. Okay, the wells. So for those of you that are outside the plume and you don't have the ability to get hooked up to the mud water, which I highly recommend you do if you are in the plume. Why? Because it's being monitored. They're watching it. They're taking care of your water. So that's a safer route for you to get hooked up to the city water. Secondly, to think that your well is pristine, no well in America is pristine, and I'm pretty confident to say that. Our aquifers are done in. Anybody that works for the EPA will tell you that. The head of Region 6 has told me that. So if you think you're getting great water because you have a well, don't be like me. I took it for granted. I thought, I have the best water in the world. And it was killing my neighbors, my animals, my husband. It affected my whole family. Most of my neighbors where I used to live are now dead of cancer. So here's one thing. Even if you have the most pristine water, you're still going to get heavy metals, which can do you in, herbicides and pesticides from 100 years ago. So there's all kinds of things coming in that water, coming from north. It flows from the north to the southeast. So whatever's up that way is coming down your way. Just because there's a Superfund site right here doesn't mean you're not getting other things into your water. So I highly recommend get on the mud water if you can. If you can't, you need to filter your well. Period. You need to get filtration. Yes, sir.
Is the mud water, say, White Oak, is that coming from wells as well?
It is mud water, yes, but here's the difference. They went down to a deeper aquifer and also they monitor that water. And so they're looking at things, they treat that water. So there's not bacteria in that water because they're treating it. There's different things that they do to it to make sure it's safe for you.
Okay.
When you mention a filter, I guess people have to know who to go to see if it's an appropriate type of filter?
Sure, so the type of filter that you want is a high activated carbon filter and it's coconut husk. And what that coconut husk does is it binds over 2,000 different chemicals to the coconut husk. That filter only needs to be changed out of that tank every 5 to 7 years. But that will save your life. I believe you can go on the EPA's website and look at, it's called a CAT hack, HAC, high activated carbon. If you want to know more about it later, you can ask me my phone number and I will be more than happy to educate you about it. Also, the next thing I was going to talk about, some of the effects. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to say that we recently got one of the filters and it does work.
So we have taken before and after tests.
But not in the house.
Yeah, where I used to live in Highlands, we had dioxin, TCDD, and all types of chemicals, jet fuel, all different kinds of chemicals in my well water. We didn't know, we didn't taste it. We had no idea, and that was one of the things I wanted to talk about with you, was the effects that I started feeling about a year in. I started having tightness in my hands. I was only in my 40s at the time. Started having burning in my veins, toenail issues, hair loss, throwing up blood. All of a sudden my daughter had cancer, my animals had cancer, I couldn't grow my vegetables, all these things, so I started going door to door. But some of the issues that I want to tell you right now were what I experienced, which was ringing in the ears. That's your body trying to detox chemicals. I no longer have ringing in my ears. I have chelated myself, which I have pulled these chemicals out through chelation. Seeing stars. When you start seeing stars, that could mean that you have chemicals in you as well. When you start getting dizzy, you're tired a lot. Toenail issues. So all of these things can come with heavy metal poisoning, contamination poisoning. I kept just playing it off like, oh, I'm getting old. You know, but I was in my 40s and already I'm having all these issues. So those were some of the issues I wanted to talk about. The other thing was, at one point my daughter was, you don't want to mention Kelly Wilson? No? Okay. All right, the signs were stolen again. Not shocking. We do pay for those signs. Those are our property. I and her team, Jackie's team, worked very hard to get those signs out. So what we've been doing now is we go Friday, we put them out. I go back again Sunday or Monday and I put them out again, and I might go out Tuesday and put some more out. We are only doing good things for the community, and we are trying to help y'all. And my hope is that these signs will not be stolen every time, because then we have to purchase more signs and it's a never-ending cycle. We're not trying to hurt you guys, so we're trying to help. Also, would you guys mind, so we go around and we do door hangers on the doors. Would you prefer that we hang them on the doors or we hang them on the mailbox? By a show of hands for the mailbox?
Mailbox is against the law.
Well, not in the mailbox, on the mailbox. We're not opening the door. So we're just simply hanging it on there. Mailbox? Okay. It would be easier for us, for the mailbox, by a show of hands for the door, because the doors take a lot more time and two people might not want us on their front door. Yeah, I put them all through the whole community. Yeah. They get taken so fast sometimes that I believe they get taken back up probably that day. So, yeah.
Some people have seen them, so we know that some people see them before they
Yeah.
get taken up, but a lot of people don't.
Okay. All right.
We don't know,
We don't know yet.
but we'll find out.
We're getting closer to finding out who it
We're
is.
trying to find out.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, let us know.
I drove by one
Okay.
tonight.
Oh, good, okay.
Good.
And also for Commissioner Ramsey, I just want to give a shout out to him and all of the help. He's always sending someone to our meeting to make sure that he's up on everything that we have to say. He's backed us to the hilt, and I mean the amazing stuff that this guy does. Cypress has never seen so many brand-new roads and things getting done in Cypress, and I'm really proud of him, and I just wanted to give him a shout-out for all the hard work that he's doing. He puts his money where his mouth is. He has never not done one thing that he told us he would do. So anyway, shout-out to Commission.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I'm not the commission.
Yeah.
I work for them.
Yes.
Good bidder.
All right, thank you for your additional remarks. Okay, folks, so how many of you here tonight are planning on attending the EPA meeting next week? Great, wonderful. All right,
Whereabouts is that?
so it's Wild Middle School, which is actually where, I think where our last meeting was. All right.
Mills Road.
Just down the road from Matsky,
Okay.
Okay.
next to the church,
I'll get fond
the
of
Met.
I'm
Yes,
gonna call you and I'll give you the address.
or we have it here.
I'll the address on the
Oh.
phone.
Yeah.
I'm still gonna call you.
Don't worry, this time wait it out.
All right, well, we are continuing to do our quarterly testing. So we, as Rachel mentioned, the map was updated with the latest information from the latest round of testing. And if you have a well and you would like for us to test your well and we have not, please feel free to contact us. We'll get you on our next round of quarterly testing. And then just a reminder again to please fill out that survey.
Very good.
And now I'll open it up for questions, and I see Marlene's hand inching up. Yes?
What it says, what do you want to know? I'd like an accurate timeline. With this timeline that says ongoing, with no benchmarks, could be for the next 20 years, another century.
Right. Yeah, and that's, with Rachel saying that in 2017 there was the information in the 5-year review of what needed to be done, and getting to the next 5-year review and most of it not being done, and then setting milestone dates 4 years out from that. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
What is if the filtration system at each home would at least improve the health of the living residents, what would that cost for those in that plume area?
$1 million plus. That's why.
1 million plus?
That's why they did that. That TCQ had that for the people who had contaminated wells. They put in the filtration systems. That was costing close to $1 million. And that's why
That
they
is a
negotiate.
drop in the bucket when it
Yes.
comes to your health
That's why
and
they-
all the cancer. And I can promise you, not everybody can afford it, so we as residents are also going to be paying for it.
But the EPA's answer to that is they hook up to the mud.
So, yes, to all of the above. What's your name?
Mark.
Mark? Okay, Mark was saying that when TCEQ brought the filters, it was about $1 million plus. And now there's nearly half of the homes on the mud. So potentially it'd be less, but then again, with inflation, I don't know. But what we're seeing at the well is a higher concentration of the chemical than what we're seeing at the tap. So that means there's a loss in the line between the well and the kitchen sink. And that loss is the chemical becoming a vapor and going into the air. So a filter is, I would say, first and foremost, the best thing that can be done on the short term to protect at each home from the ingestion of the contaminants and most of the exposure. It's not a 100%. We do know, by testing the well that had some of the chlorinated compounds in it, that it does what it says it's going to do, a cat hack in getting that out of the water. So it is a very good choice. If those of you in the community want to advocate for that, I'll advocate right beside you. I will support that. That is something that can be done in our lifetime. in the next year, in the next 6 months, right? So this remedial investigation that they're going to be launching probably this fall, that can take 2, 3, 5 years. You have a remedial investigation where you look at what's there, what the extent of the deeper aquifer contamination is, and then comes the feasibility study, where you then study what can be done to fix it. And so it's going to be a lengthy process, but I know you've been in this for a long time, Mark, and so have some of the rest of you. And if we keep on them and continue working with the different elected officials and agencies and keep that pressure on the EPA, more can get done here at a faster pace. I've seen it happen. Y'all have great support from the elected officials. So I do feel confident that if we continue to engage in this, things will move.
We have a budget surplus in the state of Texas. 22 billion. Whew, 1 million is a drop in the bucket.
Hey, I like that point. I'm gonna let that marinate. Thank you, Marlene. Yes, Alita.
When did they announce the meeting?
Oh, do you not know about it? Alita's with Harris County Pollution Control. Y'all, we have a communication problem. If our county pollution control is not readily aware of the EPA's meeting next week, that's a problem. So we know that there's a communication problem with the local communities, but for one of our government entities to sit here and just be learning about this is deeply concerning. You can put that on your survey.
The only way I knew was through you. And I've communicated with them a lot.
How many people in here received this to your mailbox? 2? Okay, 3. All right, so 3.
They were not addressed to the individual people. They were addressed as resident.
Oh, so maybe they blanketed a specific area. Okay. So we found out about it very recently. We knew that the agency was trying to plan a meeting, but were having trouble securing a venue. And I think within the last 2 weeks, we received confirmation they'd secured the venue, and we found out the date and time. And then last week, I believe it was, we got a copy of this meeting flyer, and they said they would be sending it out. And we asked them to also post it on their website because some of the people who we were communicating with had not heard about it. So we said, you know, please, we can direct them to your website if you would post this meeting announcement there. That's deeply concerning. When I first got involved at the Superfund site that I used to live by, everyone was pointing fingers at each other. People were yelling at each other. There was no accountability. And the agencies were not communicating. And over the years, it got better and better. And, you know, first and foremost, the community involvement plan that we discussed at our last meeting with you all doesn't even have the right elected officials in place. So we have the same community involvement coordinator for the site that we've had for a very long time. So some of these things are just certainly inexcusable. Were you aware of it outside of Thea communicating with you all?
I was not aware of it.
No. How about with Molly's office? First time. Yes.
I've just got general, it's sort of science background for me, but why does this darn thing just stay in place? I mean, we keep sucking the water out, other people keep sucking out the water, and it stays there. Initially, we were here 2014 through about 18, things were coming down, and poof, it stopped.
Is the number of, or the amount of SBE in place a factor, and is it one of several, in your opinion, as to what you'd like to see?
Sure. So I do. So 2 questions and comments here. So I do believe that the soil vapor extraction system, which you can see here, this is the shopping center, and these dark lines are the piping for the soil vapor extraction system, which hooks up to the filtration center behind the shopping center to the east. And each of these are points that is pulling in vapor. That's only pulling ground surface to about 30 to 50 feet. So that's only addressing the original source area. It's working slowly, much slower than they planned, but it's working. So
Is that street or what, is that on a street or is that just still on Jones Road?
So this is Jones right here, and this is Bearley Lane.
And I can't see your lot.
So to the bottom is Bearley Lane, and to the left is Jones.
The last is what?
Jones. That is
Oh,
Jones
that says
Road.
Jones.
Uh-huh.
No.
Yeah. So there was some bioremediation done a little bit deeper that had a positive impact at first, but then it started declining. And so they stopped it. They have done some more recently, but the EPA has not told us, and that's what one of the things we need to send them, Rachel, is we want to hear about the bioremediation. When they were at our last community meeting, they had not finished reviewing the data from December of last year yet to see if it's effective or not.
Because
So,
they're pulling from 240 feet, 240 feet.
right. So when you say that the plume hasn't necessarily, that it's still there, the EPA at this moment in time does not know with confidence where exactly the plume is. They have not delineated it. So they can't say with confidence where exactly it is. So they may have recently hired, I know they were looking to contract an independent party to do just that, to figure out exactly where the plume is, and then they're going to create a 3D model so that people can get a better idea spatially where it is and in reference, geographically, but also in reference to the water wells. But the nature of these chemicals is very finicky. So it's complex in a sense because they behave a little erratic, but this is something that it's rinse and repeat. These types of sites are, it's not like the site where there's the nuclear waste underground and the underground landfill fires migrating towards it, right?
Yeah.
It's not like that. It's not, it's not rocket science, shall we say.
Well, someone mentioned earlier about fluctuating contaminant levels.
Yes.
What causes that?
Well, different things. Atmospheric pressure, because they're chemicals that are in the water and then they become a gas. If they have the opportunity to interact with oxygen and or heat and become a gas, they will do so. And so part of the problem is the plume has densely concentrated chemicals in it. And so you might be able to hit the surface of it, but what's down here in the deeply concentrated chemical will keep surviving for decades and decades. And so you're really only making an impact on what's on the outer edges of that plume. And so when you test, say, in the summer, you might have higher levels because heat helps activate the chemicals. And so you might, in the winter, have lower concentrations that you're finding because it's not evaporating or volatilizing into a gas as quickly.
So based on that, when is the best time to test?
So you should test both because the plume, these chemicals behave a bit erratic, and you should test, I would say, quarterly, and you should keep testing. If you get a well that does not have the chemicals in a one-time test, you test it again. You don't just stop testing it. And we've seen the EPA stop testing once they got a clean read in the well, in wells. And this is people who've worked on PERC sites, that's the main chemical here. they will tell you, you keep testing because it fluctuates. And the chemicals also like to sink. So at one time, based on the chemistry and the specific situation, the chemical could be sinking. And you pull the sample at that time, you're going to get a different reading. So to show you here why you can't really rely on the theories of how these chemicals behave, in December of 2015, this well for PCE or PERC tested 93.9. And then coming back in May, 2 years later, 10.5. Right? So then you see here in February, 8.4. Jumped up in June of that year, a warmer month, right, to 26. Then again, February, 26 again. So the behavior is very erratic.
That's our well, I'm pretty sure.
I think that is your well.
But one thing I'd say is EPA were testing from way down 240, so they were running around, I think, for, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes to actually get it right through the whole system. So they should have been testing down there. Now, the temperature down at that level should be just about constant year round.
You gotta remember that we're talking about groundwater, and so it's not a static thing.
Just down there, it's about the same.
Sure, but I think with our lack of a solid confining layer, it's interbedded, right? So it's not like we're, the upper East Coast where we have these bedrock aquifers. It's interbedded clay, sand, gravel. So you have fluctuations that are related to atmospheric conditions. You disagree? Yes.
The last time they were here, they told us that they would be shutting off the filtration system because it would freeze. I know they live in Dallas. It doesn't freeze that often here.
Yes.
So why would they be shutting off the system for 4 to 6 months?
So that was their solution to the February freeze several years back. When the February freeze happened, the system was not, and sorry, I'm going to jump back ahead to the SVE system. What Marlene is referring to is the EPA turned this system off that's pulling gas and water here and filtering it. They shut that off for a period of time during our historically coldest months because the February freeze, was it Uri?
Yes.
Uri? Damaged the system and there was loss. The pipe is very low, it's very shallow, that all of the contaminants are running through, and there was not adequate winterization that was done. So they turned it off to prevent a release should a freeze impact the infrastructure.
So it's also not pulling or extracting it's not extracting the chemical if it's not operational, correct?
Correct.
But we're going to turn it off to save money.
I don't know. I don't know what the restartup is. I don't know. I don't know if that's correct. But in my mind, the solution is adequate winterization rather than shutting it down for several months. So. What time is it? Okay, wanted to make sure I wasn't keeping y'all too long. Please, I welcome though any further questions, comments, concerns.
Do you want us to pick up? We can go row, pick up your comments.
Yeah, folks. If anyone wants to, sit at the table on your way out and fill out the survey, that would be great. Or you can just drop it with the team on your way out.
And that's really good that you're giving them a heads up a week ahead of time so that when they say, oh, we don't have an answer to that, then you can really go after them.
Yeah.
They've been free.
Well, of course, yes. But we want it to be as productive as possible. And a lot of times you go to these meetings and you just feel like you heard the exact same thing you heard 2 years ago, and you see the exact same posters you saw 2 years ago, And it's not a really good use of anybody's time or the tax dollars that sent the EPA down here from Dallas. So we just really want, to maximize how productive the meeting is for everyone's time. And we appreciate all of your time as well. All right, thank you all very much. I look forward to seeing you all in 1 week.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.